Hello, I'm Cecilia Louie of Paper Zen. For this project, I'm going to double the size of my pattern. This ability to enlarge happens to be my favorite feature of my PDF ebook. Ideally, you'd print onto an 11 by 17 or tabloid size sheet of paper, but since I don't have a printer that large, I'm going to show you what to do with an 8.5 by 11 or letter size paper. For the template of the letter Y, I'm going to print that at 200%. You can simply press print, then page setup, then type 200% in the scale dialog box. Make sure auto rotate and center is checked off, and that's just going to scale it from the center outward. All the margins all around will get cut off and only the items in the middle will get printed. So for this project, I'm going to be printing it onto vellum paper. Vellum is translucent so I can see through it, and this paper is safe for my printer, so make sure of that first. You can use whatever printer safe paper you have, it doesn't have to be vellum. I just want to be able to trace through this paper. The letter Y enlarges nicely at 200% because it sits well on a sheet of 8.5 by 11. This is going to allow me to frame it for someone's wall or their room. So play around with the sizes for your letter. Not all the letters are going to work well at 200%. I think the letter W is a bit too large, so just play around with that percentage. Now for the pattern portion. You can print this on regular paper, and there are two ways to go about doing this. So the first option is quite straightforward. You would just print your pattern out at 100% and put your strip on top of the template. You would mark your first segment, move it over, line that up with the beginning of it right here, and mark the second one. So I would fold on this one. So then I would just continue on and move it over. This is how you get double the length. Pretty straightforward, right? So I would just continue that on. And till I've run out of room. So I would continue the next strip with a new strip, and you just start at the 5. So I would know to fold, or in this case I would actually have to cut that strip right here, and I would fold every other one. So I would skip one and fold. And remember, when you fold, make sure you don't fold astray like that. Make sure your fingers guide the top and bottom edge so that you're folding perpendicular. So then I would skip one and fold. And then of course, you know, you would just need to erase all these markings. So that's how you can easily double the length that's needed. Now, what would happen if you wanted 140%? Well, that's when you need to do option B. Since the pattern is not in the middle of the page, we're going to need to tile all pages and have the cut marks option on. Then type in the tile scale percentage that you'd like to print your printout. In my example, I am doing it at 200%. Okay, so these are the pages that have printed out, and I'm going to discard any that are blank or not helpful for our pattern. So essentially that one's not needed. Okay, so I've come to the pattern portion, so I'm going to keep this one and this one. These are what are known as trim marks, and you'll see there's one at the top and the bottom. What they're trying to help you guideline is where to trim. So I'm going to take a ruler and basically line it up to the trim marks. And I'm going to trim this side. So because I'm right-handed, I'm just going to turn that page around. And now you can match these two up. So I would just get some pieces of tape and tape these at the top and the bottom. And now what happens is you've got the exact size that you need this to mark your strips. Now that my strips have been measured and folded, they're ready to be used. I'm just going to set them aside because I wanted to explain I wanted to put this monogram in a shadow box. What's a shadow box? It's basically a picture frame that has some depth to it. And I got this from Michael's, and it's a good size, 8 by 8, because any monogram looks great in a square. And I just wanted to point out a few things of how to transfer your letter to this cardstock. In my book, I already have a 6 by 6 inch square ready for you guys to use in any way that you want. So in this case, what do you do when it's an 8 by 8 square and the square that I provided is all printed away? I just wanted to point out there is a baseline here, there is a center line for every letter. I basically took my ruler and measured, so if this is going to be in a shadow box that's 8 by 8, you already know that 8 divided by 2 is 4, and that's where I would mark off the 0, and here is the 8. So now that we figured out the distance left and right, let's figure it out top and bottom. Luckily, we've printed this letter onto vellum paper, so all we have to do is fold it in half and match that base line to the top of the letter and just, crease it right there. Now, all of a sudden, you've got your middle mark of the letter. From there, we would put our ruler here at 4 inches, but I actually tend to like to push my letter a little bit up to the top, just a little bit, because I don't like to have it even on both sides. I like to give it just a little bit of, distance from the bottom. So I'm going to, instead of 4 inches, I'm going to move that ruler down 3 and 3 1/4. From there, I'm just going to mark right at the top and at 8 inches. So this mark ended up being about, when I measured it, it was about 1.5 inches. And I decided, okay, well, it was just a one line over, so I thought, okay, let's just make it easier on myself. I'll just make it 1.5 inches. So then from there, I decided, okay, 1.5, 1.5, and then that's when I drew my line across. This now gives me the distance from the bottom. Now I can line it up to the bottom line, and I've got my left and right. Now, why is this important to figure this out? Well, when you put things through your printer can just be a little bit off here and there. And if you were to look carefully, do you see the distance here and here are just slightly different? And that's because your printer, when it feeds the paper, it's going to shift a little bit. So, if you want to make things, quite straight, then these are the ways that you can do that. Now that I've got this letter exactly in the middle of where I want it to be, I'm going to take some removable tape and I'm going to put that behind my cardstock. Now it's not going to move, and I'm going to go, actually in this case you don't need a sunny window, all you need is your ruler and your scoring tool. I'm just using a dried up pen to do my scoring, and we're just going to score along all these lines to transfer the letter onto this work surface. Okay, so I finished transferring my letter to my work surface, and I've left a nice little indentation on my cardstock so I can see exactly where to glue my outline. And you can see here that I've cut this part of the paper away, and it's going to be very helpful. You'll see in a second why. Okay, so I'm going to glue the outline of the letter Y to my work surface. And because the letter Y has two parts here that line up, I'm going to secure those parts first. So because my source of light is coming from this direction, I have decided to turn it upside down and put some straight edge across, and I've secured it with some removable tape here on the sides. This is so that when I put my strip against here, it's going to then line up both of those straight edges, okay? So I'm going to start with the first of those two edges right here. So I'm going to dip glue just along that segment. And if you haven't watched my glue video already that explains why I smear my glue, you might want to check that out. Okay, so now I'm going to secure the second straight edge along the top. Okay, so now I can remove this ruler because the function has been served. So I'm just going to tackle this straight edge first. So I'm just going to do a portion at a time, and I'm just pulling it taut. Again, strategic dipping. Okay, so that part's done. So let's take care of this part. I'm going to take this guy out of the way. And I'm just going to gently tug to the left. And I just want to confirm, is everything matching up? If not, I can still adjust. So again, I'm just going to do a portion at a time just to make my life easy. I like things easy. Okay, so now I'm ready to glue the two ends here and here. So I'm just going to pick up a little bit of glue and just push aside one of the strip ends and then bring those two edges together. And that's how you outline the uppercase letter Y. Let's go fill it up. I decided to start the center of my mandala with a circle, and I drew that using a dollar store circle template. I just kind of eyeballed where I thought the center would be. I also used the ruler to draw a line down the middle, so it gave me an idea of where the center was. And I just kind of drew some petals and some scrolls and some more petals coming the other way, some simple teardrop shapes. And you'll notice that most of it's all on one side. And do you remember that little sheet that we cut from the corner here? So what I did was I traced the same design onto this scrap sheet of paper. Now what I'm going to do is flip it over, place it underneath, and now I can trace the exact same design on the opposite side. This is a really simple technique to make sure that your design is mirrored on both sides to be as close as possible. Okay, so now that I've copied the same design onto my scrap piece of paper, it's time to transfer this design to the upper part of the letter Y. The thing is, you can see that the distance here is wider than the distance here. So let me show you how much distance there is. If I'm aligning this line here, you can see it's a little bit wider. It's going to require me to adjust a little bit here and there, and you know, that's okay because this is all handmade. First, I'm going to just kind of eyeball a center line here, just to give myself a little bit of guidance. And I can secure this with a piece of removable tape just to make sure it doesn't keep moving around. So I hope you can see I'm still able to manipulate the sheet on top, the vellum on top, to move it around to the point where I like what I see. And at that point, that's when you can start tracing again. And I'm just going to fudge, you know, here and there. And at this point, you can take it off this template and just study it. Is this what you like? If you don't, just erase it and try it again. It's not a big deal. Now I can start doing this part. I know I like the center petal to be, a strong dominant piece. I'm going to fudge the width of this piece here. Being able to trace through your pattern from below allows you to adjust your template to suit your needs exactly. So now that I've completed this side, I'm going to now continue the rest of my design right here and finish off this part of the letter Y. Okay, I finished adding the final touches to the corner up here. I decided to do something that reminds me of a peacock feather. And so now that I've done the entire part of this letter Y, I've traced it onto my scrap, and this is going to allow me to again flip it over, tuck it underneath, and immediately be able to trace an exact replica of that side. Now that I have this design done, I've taken another sheet of tracing paper and I've traced it over in color. And so what this is going to let me do is imagine different color combinations, and you can do this many times over. You can change up the colors, you can try different patterns, and imagine how it's going to be when you're actually quilling with it. The pen that I'm actually using here, I just wanted to bring it to your attention in case you've never heard of it. It's actually called Friction, and I discovered it when I went to Japan. What it does is allow me to erase the design. As I'm measuring my strips and imagining them, then I write down the measurement, and if I decide to change the measurement later on, I can easily erase it. So I love this Friction pen, and I'll link to it in the notes below. So one of the viewers asked me to show how I determine a length of a strip. I actually use centimeters in my quilling. 1 centimeter is divided into 10 little millimeters. For me to measure a millimeter is so much easier than to say 1/16 of an inch. Let me show you how I would go about determining this length. So this length here, you can see the number 5 is in here. How did I get 5? Let me just start by softening my strip. So the paper I'm using is Canson Meton paper. It's rather thick, so I tend to like to soften my strip just to warm up those kind of fibers. And I just put my strip on my design, and about midway is where I kind of pinch it. So then I bring it to my ruler, and you can see where my finger is here, and I put it against my ruler, and it says 2.5. So 2.5 times 2 is 5. And in this case, I'm going to tear my strip. And I like to just use the ruler's edge to just tear like that. So at that point, I can just soften a little bit more, just rub it right in the middle. Do you see how that brings the two ends together like that? And then I just kind of shape it and place it on my design. And I confirm, do I want it longer, shorter? Decide how you want it to look. Then I would just add a little spot of glue, bring those two ends together, and just hold it until it's dry. Now I'm going to work on the next petal, and again I'm just going to place it on top and just pinch where I imagine halfway to be. Add a spot of glue on both ends, and I'm just going to use my table surface as a straight surface to align the edges up and bring those two ends together. Do you see how that taper is? It's to a rather fine point. And I'm looking for that because I don't want bulk. And I'm going to get bulk because this paper is so thick. So to minimize that look, that's why I want to tear. And just put it back down just to confirm, is this what you want it to look like? And then again, just write down those measurements on here. And you know, because I've got all this in the colors that I'm imagining, it's very easy for me to change up the colors to know I'm talking about the 5 here, I'm talking about the 6 here, and those are the measurements. That's how I go about figuring out the lengths of these strips. And whatever mandala design that you guys come up with, you know, hopefully you guys can share your techniques with me as well. When I'm guessing, say, this open scroll here, I basically just put my strip here and try to imagine it as best as I can, try to imagine how much length I would want to curl, maybe about, you know, about there, and put my fingers here, and it ends up being around 5 centimeters. And that's how come I have a number 5 there. Then, you know, from there is the typical thing to just curl your strip. And I'm just going to unravel a little bit and re-ravel and just kind of keep playing with it until you achieve what you like. If it's too short, you just have to remake it again. If it's too long, you know, you snip off the end and just adjust until you like what you see. And then, you know, write down the measurement. And that's how I worked my way all around here. Good luck with yours, and I can't wait to see your masterpiece. I hope my tutorial today inspires you to give your quilling monogram a try with mandalas. And if you do, I'd love to see it. Tag me, okay?